The winter wind tore across the Montana plains like a living thing, howling against the rusted fences and frozen earth. Through that endless cold, a weary veteran followed the staggering footsteps of a lone German shepherd that had appeared at his door as if sent by fate. The dog did not hesitate, did not wander. It moved with sharp, unwavering intent, guiding him through the snow toward the ruins of an abandoned radar station, long forgotten by time. Surrounded by twisted metal and silence, the dog placed its paw on a weathered steel plate. A hidden mechanism clicked, the ground trembled, and as a thin line of light cut across the frozen concrete, a massive underground door began to rise, revealing a secret bunker no one was ever meant to find. If this story pulls you in, please support us by subscribing to the channel. Wind over the Montana grasslands. Winter pressed down on the Montana high plains with a cold so sharp it felt carved from stone. Wind rushed across the open fields, slicing through the darkness and rattling the thin metal walls of the old mobile home where Noah Reed lived alone at the far edge of Silver Butte. The structure creaked and groaned like an aging animal, and inside, Noah sat hunched at a small wooden table, his broad shoulders curled inward, as if trying to make himself smaller. At 40, he looked older than his years, weather-beaten skin, deep lines etched around tired blue eyes, a short brown beard peppered with premature gray, and a frame once strong from military life now slightly gaunt. He had the look of a man whose body remembered discipline but whose heart no longer saw the point of it. Bills lay scattered in front of him, electricity overdue, car insurance unpaid, bank statements stamped with late fees, and taped to the front door where the wind pushed it against the metal was the newest blow, a foreclosure notice. The bold black letters felt like a sentence someone else had written for a life he was no longer steering. Noah never imagined he would end up here, alone, numb to the world, barely hanging on. But grief had a way of carving tunnels inside a man, and his had been dug 7 years earlier when Mason Cole died in a dusty ambush overseas. Mason had been more than a teammate. He had been the kind of friend who made unbearable deployments feel survivable. A man with sandy blonde hair always sticking out beneath his helmet, a crooked grin that could cut through tension, and a fierce loyalty that set him apart from everyone else in their unit. His death had cracked something deep inside Noah. Since then, Noah had drifted like a ghost, picking up temporary jobs, losing them when nightmares left him too hollow to function, avoiding people, avoiding sunlight, avoiding anything that reminded him he was still alive when Mason wasn't. Tonight, the loneliness crushed him more brutally than usual. The wind whistled under the doorframe, and he felt it like a whisper urging him to disappear. He imagined driving straight into the endless dark highway, leaving behind the debts, the shame, the exhaustion of pretending he was fine. Then came the sound, a faint scrape, a gentle, almost apologetic scratch, barely audible over the storm. Noah didn't move at first. Wind often tossed branches or debris against the trailer, but then it came again, slower this time, followed by a low whine that didn't sound like wood or metal. It sounded like pain, real, trembling, desperate pain. Instinct pulled him to his feet before reason caught up. His boots thudded softly on the thin floor as he approached the door. His pulse was oddly loud in his ears, a rhythmic thump that felt foreign after years of emotional numbness. He unlatched the door, bracing his body against the push of the wind. Snow swirled inward, coating the entryway like powdered glass. And there, half collapsed on the top step, was a German shepherd, a large male, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, his coat a striking mix of gray and deep black. His fur was matted with melting snow. There were streaks of dried mud along his legs, and small patches of blood clinging to the edges of an old bandage someone had wrapped clumsily around his front paw. The dog lifted his head with difficulty, meeting Noah's eyes with amber irises so intelligent and steady they pierced straight through the cold. Noah crouched, his heartbeat shifting from anxiety to something else, something old and instinctive. His hands, though trembling, reached forward. The dog didn't shy away. He leaned into Noah's touch, breathing out a shudder as if relieved to finally stop pretending he was strong. "Easy, easy, buddy," Noah murmured, voice rough with disuse. The dog smelled like wet fur, dirt, and the faint metallic tang of old wounds. It was then Noah noticed the collar, not leather or nylon, but paracord, olive drab, military standard, braided in the distinctive cobra weave their unit used during downtime. Every man in their team had made one. Mason had woven his during a long night before a mission, sitting cross-legged in the sand, humming off-key while the desert wind curled around them. Noah's breath hitched. Carefully, he turned the collar. Attached to it was a small metal tag, scratched but readable. Atlas. The name hit him like a blow. Mason's dog, Mason's partner, the young, fearless shepherd who had once bounded through training fields like a creature carved from lightning. Noah remembered him, strong, alert, always watching Mason, with an adoration so pure it felt almost human. Yet here he was, older, wounded, alone on Noah's doorstep in the middle of a winter storm. Noah's chest tightened painfully. Atlas nudged forward, placing his head against Noah's knee, a gesture both weary and deliberate. That simple touch broke the last barrier inside Noah's mind. This was no random animal, no accident. No coincidence brought Mason's dog, Mason's last living piece of legacy, right to his door on the very night he was thinking of disappearing. Something shifted deep inside him, something he thought long dead. Purpose, memory, a summons he had ignored for years. As the wind screamed across the plains and snow thickened around them, Noah lifted the aging shepherd into his arms and carried him inside, knowing with absolute certainty that nothing about this night was chance. Atlas had come with a message, and Noah Reed, after 7 years of running, could no longer pretend he didn't hear it. The morning broke with a thin, pale light stretching across the Montana plains, softening the brutal edges of the night storm. The wind had calmed, but the cold still hung in the air with the weight of unspoken things. Inside the mobile home, Noah Reed moved stiffly as he cleaned the last of the melted snow from Atlas's thick gray-black coat. The German shepherd, older now yet still carrying the remnants of a soldier's posture, lay still only until Noah finished bandaging his injured paw. But as soon as Noah stepped back, the dog rose and fixed those amber eyes on the door again, his tail held low but purposeful. It wasn't restlessness, it wasn't fear, it was direction. Atlas had come for a reason. Noah wasn't sure what had changed inside him overnight. Maybe the way Atlas leaned against him, or the paracord collar woven by hands Noah had once trusted with his life. But he felt something he had not felt in years. A pull, a mission-shaped gravity. Before dawn fully broke, he strapped on his worn boots and shrugged into his heavy winter coat, a faded navy parka with fraying cuffs. He grabbed the old combat knife he still kept more out of habit than need, a small emergency kit, and his canteen. Atlas nudged the coat again, as if approving. Noah almost laughed at the absurdity of taking orders from a dog, yet somehow it felt natural. Right. Outside, the frost-covered grass crunched beneath their steps. Silver Butte lay silent in the distance, its few scattered houses still half asleep beneath layers of lingering mist. Atlas led with steady determination, limping slightly but refusing assistance. Noah kept close behind, his breath forming pale clouds, his mind flooded with memories he had spent years trying to bury. Mason Cole would have known where the dog was going. Mason would have known why. But Noah had spent so long refusing to think of the past that now each memory came at him like shards of glass, bright, sharp, cutting through the numbness. They walked beyond the town limits, across wide, open fields glazed with frost. The landscape shifted into rolling terrain where battered fences marked forgotten farmland. Rusted metal posts leaned at odd angles, as if bowing to the relentless wind. Ahead, the silhouette of an old structure rose, skeletal towers, broken antennas, and a distant dome once meant to track threats that never came. It was the abandoned Cold War radar station, a place children whispered about and adults ignored. Noah had passed it a few times before, but never paid attention. Now Atlas walked toward it with quiet certainty, as though returning to a waypoint only he could read. The compound looked like a graveyard of machinery. Towers once proud now sagged under decades of neglect. Wires dangled like dead vines. A collapsed satellite dish lay half buried in the dirt, covered in lichen. Noah scanned the area with instinctive caution. Old habits never really died. He noticed the prints in the frosted ground, Atlas's, fresh tracks, but older paw marks too, maybe days or weeks old. The dog had been here before. Atlas stopped before a dented shipping container tucked between two rusting radar pylons. The container, sun-faded and dented along one side, looked like scrap metal ready to collapse. But the dog stepped confidently onto a metal grate that had been partially camouflaged with dead grass. He placed all four paws at the center. Noah opened his mouth to question it, then a sharp mechanical click echoed beneath them. The steel beside the grate shifted with a low grinding sound, revealing a rectangular opening in the ground. A hidden entrance. Noah's breath caught. Every instinct, military, emotional, human, tightened inside him. He peered down into the darkness. There was a ladder and faint light, cold, white, steady. Atlas paused, looking back at him, tail flicking once before the dog moved toward the opening with calm confidence. Noah followed, gripping the cold metal rungs as he descended into the unknown. The moment his boots reached the floor, the air changed. It was warmer, filtered, unnervingly sterile. LED panels cast a clean white-blue glow along the hallway, reflecting off smooth metal walls that didn't match the decayed exterior above. The corridor hummed softly, a low vibration of machinery still functioning after years in solitude. Noah felt something in his chest twist, not fear, not exactly, more like recognition. Mason Cole had always been meticulous, methodical, a man who prepared for outcomes no one else imagined. If Mason had built something secret, it wouldn't be half measures. Atlas trotted ahead confidently, his tail swaying with familiarity. Noah followed until the corridor opened into a room that should not have existed beneath a forgotten Montana field. A command center, a bunker of sorts, but not military issue. It had the bones of government engineering, reinforced steel, climate-controlled vents, server racks built into the walls. But the modifications were unmistakably personal. Solar inverters were mounted neatly beside wind turbine regulators and a backup generator that looked far too new to have been abandoned. Screens lined the main console, though most were off, except a single one blinking in standby. What stopped Noah's breath wasn't the technology. It was the picture taped to the wall. A photo, slightly creased, edges curling, showing himself and Mason in their early deployment days. Noah looked younger, leaner, with clearer eyes and a smile he barely recognized. Mason stood beside him, sandy blonde hair tousled, grin wide and proud. And at their feet, an energetic young Atlas sat with ears perked and eyes bright like twin flames. Noah reached out and traced Mason's face with his thumb. The action felt like touching a live wire. Pain, memory, and a sudden sense of purpose surged through him in a way that almost buckled his knees. Atlas settled beside him, leaning against Noah's leg in a quiet gesture of grounding. The bunker was real. Atlas had brought him here intentionally, and if Mason had built this secret place, there had to be a reason. Noah forced himself to focus as he scanned the room for clues. A small workbench held old blueprints and personal notes, written in Mason's distinct, hurried handwriting. Most dealt with power systems, structural modifications, and security protocols. A stack of notebooks lay neatly arranged. Mason's journals, no doubt, worn at the edges but intact. And in the corner, partially concealed beneath a thin layer of dust, lay a metal storage case marked with stenciled letters, Cole, personal files. Noah knelt slowly and lifted the lid. Inside were USB drives, sealed envelopes, and a dog-eared field diary. His pulse quickened. Mason had been hiding something he considered important enough to bury under an entire radar station. He picked up one of the envelopes. It was addressed in Mason's handwriting. To Noah. His throat tightened. He stared at the envelope for several long seconds before slipping it into his coat. He couldn't open it yet, not while another, more immediate truth clawed at him. Mason built all this, Noah whispered, more to steady himself than to inform Atlas. The dog looked up at him, blinking slowly, as if confirming what Noah already knew. Whatever had brought Atlas to him hadn't been luck. It had been a message, a summons from a ghost, and this underground fortress was only the beginning. The bunker's artificial lights hummed with a soft, sterile steadiness, a stark contrast to the world of rust and winter lingering above. Noah Reed stood before the main console, shoulders squared yet heavy, as lines of corrupted data flickered across the screen. His breath felt tight in his chest, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing that whatever he found inside this place would rewrite the last 7 years of his life. Atlas lay beside him, the old German shepherd stretched out like a silent sentinel, his gray-black fur catching the cool LED glow. He watched Noah with those amber eyes full of patience and a kind of faith Noah no longer believed he deserved. Most of the system refused to cooperate. Files were fragmented, drives half dead, partitions locked behind layers of encryption too advanced to be accidental. Noah worked with the steady, methodical focus of the man he used to be, his fingers moving over keys with muscle memory from missions long past. He had once performed battlefield data extractions inside collapsing structures under gunfire. Compared to that, this bunker was quiet, almost peaceful. Yet his heart pounded harder now, each beep of the console echoing like a pulse inside his skull. As he sifted through the debris of corrupted systems, pieces began to align. A corporate logo half visible in a document header, mission coordinates from operations he remembered too vividly, wire transfers routed through offshore banks. And stamped across multiple fragments was a name he had hoped never to hear again, Helios Dynamics. An American private security company polished on the outside but rumored, even during their deployment, to engage in murkier dealings. Noah felt a cold ripple creep across his spine. He dove deeper. Then, buried beneath a broken directory, he found a small file labeled simply, "For Noah." His throat tightened. His hand froze above the mouse. Atlas lifted his head, ears pricking slightly, sensing the shift in the air. The screen blinked twice before stabilizing. Grainy footage appeared, the frame shaky at first before steadying, and then Mason Cole filled the screen. He was thinner than Noah remembered, cheekbones sharper, stubble thicker, sandy blonde hair unkempt from long hours without rest. But the eyes were the same, sharp, warm, endlessly loyal. Eyes that once looked at Noah like he could pull the whole team through hell if he had to. But tonight, in this recording, those eyes carried something else. Fear, resolve, and a terrible knowing. "Noah," Mason began, voice rough yet steady. "If you're watching this, then you already know I didn't make it home." Noah's breath hitched, his hand curled into a fist. Mason continued, "It wasn't the enemy, it wasn't bad luck, it was Helios." He leaned closer, jaw tightening, the old, stubborn fire burning in his gaze. "They've been selling intel, switching patrol routes, leaking our positions, feeding chaos to make the conflict last longer, more contracts, more profit. We were targets, Noah, you, me, the whole unit, and I got too close." Noah's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing himself to stay locked onto the screen. "I had to build this place." Mason's camera panned briefly, showing early versions of the bunker, unfinished walls, scattered wiring, blueprints taped to bulkheads. "It's the only way I could protect what I found." I used everything I saved, every cent. Think of it as insurance. The camera shook slightly as Mason exhaled. Not fear, determination. He lifted a young Atlas into view. The dog, perhaps 2 or 3 then, bright-eyed and eager, licked Mason's cheek. Mason smiled, one of the smiles Noah had missed, without realizing how deeply. Atlas is the key. If something happened to me, he knows where to go. He'll find you. He always finds who he trusts. Noah felt something crack open in his chest. Mason's voice softened. Noah, this isn't your fault. What happened in that canyon wasn't your failure. It was a hit job. I'm sorry you carried something that was never yours to bear. Noah grabbed the edge of the desk, grounding himself as grief surged through him like a tidal wave. You were my brother, Mason said. You still are, and the mission isn't over, so I'm giving it to you now. The feed cut to black. Silence crushed the bunker. Noah stood still, unable to breathe. All the guilt, all the nights he had replayed Mason's final moments, every whispered accusation he had hurled at himself. It all shattered, not because the pain was gone, but because the truth had taken its place. Atlas nudged his leg, whining softly, pressing his weight into Noah, as if anchoring him to the world. Noah rested a trembling hand on the dog's broad head. You knew, he whispered. You carried this. 7 years of hell, lifted by a single message. The grief didn't disappear, but it changed shape, solidifying into something sharp, cold, and terrifyingly clear. Purpose. Noah rose with a steadiness he had not felt in a decade. His movements turned precise, almost ritualistic. He grabbed the small mirror resting beside the first aid kit and examined his reflection. Tired blue eyes stared back. A beard, untrimmed for months, covered his jaw with patches of gray. His hair hung messy, shadowing his face like overgrown brush, hiding a structure beneath. He picked up the old electric trimmer from the emergency supplies drawer. The buzzing filled the bunker as tufts of hair fell onto the metal floor. The beard came off next, exposing the strong jawline he had once taken pride in. By the time he looked again, he didn't see the ghost anymore. He saw the soldier, older, scarred, but still standing. He moved to the storage lockers next. His old body armor lay inside, still bearing small scratches from missions across the world. He slid into it with a slow, practiced motion. The weight settled onto his shoulders, like an old friend. The tactical belt, the reinforced gloves, the weatherproof boots. Piece by piece, he assembled the man he used to be. Atlas watched with complete attention, ears forward, posture alert, as if recognizing the transformation. Noah returned to the main console, pulling up the bunker schematics Mason had left behind. Air duct networks, tunnel routes, energy lines, emergency exits. He studied them with laser focus, absorbing each detail until he could visualize the entire structure with his eyes closed. Then he opened the envelope Mason had addressed to him. Inside was a single line, handwritten in Mason's scratchy penmanship. I trust you to finish what they tried to silence. Noah closed his fist around the paper. He didn't cry. He didn't break. The soldier in him had awakened, and the war Mason never finished was about to begin. Night settled over the Montana grasslands like a vast, shifting curtain, thick clouds rolling across the sky and smothering what little moonlight remained. The abandoned radar station loomed in the darkness above ground, its silhouette jagged and broken, while deep below the earth Noah Reed worked in the bunker with renewed precision. The calm, cold light from the monitors washed over his sharpened features, the cleaner jawline now free of the fatigue-ridden beard, the steely blue eyes no longer dull, but ignited by purpose. Atlas lay close beside him, the loyal German shepherd's gray-black coat catching faint reflections from the screens, looking older yet resolute, as if he too understood the gravity of what they were about to uncover. Noah had spent the last hour bypassing the bunker's final major lock, a file Mason had named Valkyrie, sealed behind a military-grade encryption protocol that only a handful of specialists in the world could break. The file was beyond anything Mason could have accessed legitimately while deployed. Whatever was inside was dangerous enough that Mason had hidden it under layers of misdirection and buried it behind a maze of corrupted partitions. Noah couldn't crack it alone. He needed a key stored on a decaying military archive server in Nevada, one that had not been accessed for years. He routed his request through 7 countries, bounced it off outdated satellite nodes, and cloaked his digital signature beneath a web of false geolocation trails. The process wasn't clean, but it was the best ghost mask he had left. Still, he knew the moment he touched that server, someone, somewhere, might feel the disturbance. Atlas watched him work, ears twitching as though catching frequencies only he could sense. When the access token finally slid into place, the screen glowed with a bright green line of text, "Valkyrie decryption authorized." Then the file expanded into dozens of documents, maps, financial records, covert communiques, each one a nail driven into the coffin of Helios Dynamics. Noah's heart tightened as he opened the first. Patrol route alterations, falsified intelligence briefs, supply chain manifests involving stolen weapons, internal emails discussing casualty rates as profit projections. Every fragment confirmed what Mason said in his final video. Helios had engineered chaos overseas for profit, and Mason had died because he uncovered the truth. But what Noah didn't know was that his ghost-masked request had triggered an automated alert in a fortified glass tower hundreds of miles away in Dallas, Texas. There, in a high-security floor lined with biometric locks and tinted windows, a man named Victor Kane stood over his glowing monitor. Kane, early 50s, had the appearance of a corporate wolf. Tall, broad-shouldered, with graying black hair combed back to reveal a widow's peak. His sharply cut suit couldn't soften the hard edges of his face or the deep, permanent crease above his nose, a scar from a bar fight in his 20s that had left him both marked and proudly defiant. His dark eyes held no warmth. They reflected the ruthlessness of a man who built his career on intelligence leaks and quiet disappearances. A warning flashed on his screen. Unauthorized access attempt. Archive Al Delta. Mason Cole. Classified. Origin Northern Montana region. Victor's jaw clenched. Mason Cole. The dead soldier who had caused so much trouble. The one loose thread Kane thought he had already cut years ago. He picked up his phone and dialed a number without hesitation. "Mobilize a retrieval unit," he ordered. "Location incoming, bring suppression gear, and make sure the drones run silent." Within hours, under the cover of the storm-swallowed night, an unmarked black helicopter flew low over the plains and deposited 8 armed contractors several kilometers from the radar station. Each wore dark tactical gear with no insignia, their faces obscured behind matte visors. They moved with disciplined precision, the gait of seasoned mercenaries. Among them was Ethan Marrow, a hulking man with a shaved head and a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw. He rarely spoke, not because he lacked intelligence, but because a roadside bomb years earlier had cost him part of his vocal cords. His silence made him even more unnerving. They swept forward like shadows, deploying signal jammers, setting drones aloft, scanning for heat signatures. But Noah wasn't unaware. Inside the bunker, hidden cameras disguised as rusted bolts, bent antenna joints, and hollow metal vents fed live surveillance into the main console. The moment the first mercenary stepped into view, Noah stiffened. Atlas rose instantly, ears rigid, muscles coiled like springs beneath his graying fur. The dog let out a low, controlled growl, not fear but recognition of an approaching threat. Noah zoomed in on the incoming teams. 8 men, armed, coordinated. They weren't local authorities, they weren't tourists, and they weren't lost. Helios had found him faster than he expected. "All right, boy," Noah murmured, placing a steady hand on Atlas's head. We do this together. Atlas responded with a soft huff, pressing his nose against Noah's palm. Then he trotted toward a wall panel Noah had yet to open since entering the bunker. The dog lifted a paw and tapped twice. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a secondary console with switches Noah hadn't noticed before. Mason had built the bunker not as a hiding place, but as a battlefield. Noah activated the first switch. Above ground, the mercenaries' drones flickered, stumbled in the air, then dropped like stones. Signal jammers. He activated another. Around the radar station, small sonic charges buried beneath the snow emitted disorienting blasts, short bursts of high-frequency sound that caused 3 mercenaries to stagger, helmets ringing. Ethan Marrow barked hand signals, regrouping the team. They switched tactics, pulling out larger equipment, ground-penetrating radar and seismic scanners designed to locate underground structures. They swept the terrain with widening arcs. Noah's stomach tightened. Once they pinpointed the bunker's location, they would drill. Explosives would follow, then fire. He and Atlas would be smoked out like animals. He had to move. He grabbed the emergency backpack Mason had left stocked with essentials: filtered water, compact rations, tools, thermal blanket. He strapped a tactical harness on Atlas, one that distributed weight away from the injured paw, but gave the dog mobility. When Noah opened the side corridor, the cold air of the escape tunnel spilled in. The escape passage descended sharply before turning into a narrow underground conduit, leading toward the distant sound of trickling water. The air grew damp, echoing with the hollow drip of mineral-rich droplets. Beneath the radar station, a subterranean stream ran through a rocky channel, cold enough to numb bone but wide enough for a man and his dog to wade through. Noah stepped in first. The icy water bit into his skin, sending a shock up his legs. Atlas hesitated only a moment before following, determined despite the lingering tenderness in his bandaged paw. The tunnel led them for more than 100 meters through twisting passages, until finally a faint blue glow filtered in from above. They emerged beneath a canopy of towering pine trees, the stream bubbling around their boots before winding deeper into the forest. Noah inhaled sharply, the fresh resin scent, the cold mountain air, the sense of open sky above them after hours in metal confines. Behind him, the distant echo of drilling equipment began to thrum. Helios was already trying to break through, but Noah and Atlas were no longer trapped underground. They were ghosts in the dark, unpredictable, unseen, and finally free to take the fight into their own hands. The first light of pre-dawn barely touched the horizon when Noah Reed reached the ridge overlooking the abandoned radar station. The wind that swept through the high plains carried the metallic scent of cold earth and the distant thrum of machinery. Below, the Helios mercenaries clustered around their jamming equipment, confused by the malfunctioning drones and scrambled scanners. Noah adjusted the suppressor on his rifle, the matte metal cool against his freshly shaven jaw. His blue eyes, once dulled by guilt, now sharpened with clarity and purpose. Atlas, the aging German shepherd with his gray-black coat and steady amber eyes, crouched low at Noah's side, his tail taut, posture focused. Noah inhaled slowly, letting the cold burn through his chest, before exhaling in a controlled, steady whisper. "One shot," he murmured. "We break their eyes." Atlas flicked an ear, but didn't take his gaze off the men below. He waited for the wind to pause. Then he squeezed the trigger once. The bullet sliced through the early morning air and struck the portable generator with surgical precision. Sparks flew in a sudden burst of white. The hum of the machine died immediately. The surrounding mercenaries jerked back, swearing as their displays went dark. Noah shifted position, moved 3 feet to the right to avoid detection, and fired a second time. The scanning antenna shuddered as the round snapped through the connection joint, sending the device toppling sideways with a hollow metallic crash. With their tech dead, the planes fell into eerie silence, a silence thick enough to make even hardened men uneasy. Below, Victor Kane raised his head sharply. The Helios security chief looked more predatory than ever in the lifeless dawn light. Angular face tensed, narrow dark eyes scanning the ridge, with the intensity of a man accustomed to hunting those who dared to challenge him. Even in tactical gear, the man retained a brutal corporate authority. He cursed under his breath and motioned with 2 fingers, directing his best operatives forward. The 2 specialists who followed him were unmistakable. One was Ethan Marrow, the massive scar-jawed mercenary with the once-destroyed vocal cords. The other was a new arrival, Jonas Creed, a thin, wiry man with copper-toned skin, restless dark eyes, and a tightly woven braid running down the back of his neck. Jonas was nimble, twitchy, his fingers tattooed with cryptic symbols. His talent was close-quarters tracking, and his temperament reflected a lifetime spent bouncing between juvenile detention and mercenary work. Unlike Ethan's cold silence, Jonas filled the air with a low hum as he walked, a habit he adopted years ago to calm himself after an ambush in Kandahar had left him buried under rubble for 3 hours. The humming kept him centered, alive. Both men followed Victor toward the direction of Noah's contrived trail. Noah had planned it meticulously, prints leading toward a narrow stone crevice, behind the radar tower, medium depth so they looked natural, but aligned perfectly to funnel the hunters into the choke point Mason had marked in the bunker schematics. Noah knew that if Helios wanted to corner him, they would send their best through that route, and he would be waiting. Noah pulled back from the ridge and moved quickly along the sloping terrain, his steps silent on frost-glazed grass. Atlas stayed low and close, his breath steady despite the lingering soreness in his injured paw. The animal seemed to understand the gravity of what came next. Maybe he felt Mason's presence here. Maybe he simply knew the man beside him needed him more than ever. They reached the crevice moments before their pursuers. Noah climbed onto a rocky ledge above the narrow passage, the height giving him both advantage and concealment. The wind shifted, carrying faint voices, Victor's controlled impatience, Ethan's heavy boots, Jonas's soft humming. Then the 3 emerged. Victor Kane entered first, his face locked in a mask of cold determination. He scanned the rock walls with the instinct of a hunter. Ethan followed silently, broad frame filling the space, breath slow and measured. Jonas brought up the rear, humming louder now, tension rippling under every step he took. Noah rose from his crouch, the silhouette of his broad shoulders outlined by the growing dawn behind him. His rifle remained steady, aimed downward. The wind carried his voice like gravel being dragged across stone. "Helios killed Mason Cole," he said. "Tonight is your answer." Victor's lips curled, just beginning to form a retort, but he never got the chance. A deep, rumbling snarl erupted from behind the captain. Atlas launched from a shadowed pocket of stone, his muscular frame a blur despite age. His teeth clamped around Victor's knife arm, locking down with controlled but devastating precision. Victor buckled under the impact, his breath exploding from his lungs in a choked gasp. Jonas jerked back in surprise, hand going for his weapon, but Noah dropped from the ledge in a smooth, controlled slide, landing just behind the wiry man. He seized Jonas's wrist, twisted sharply, and drove a quick elbow into the mercenary's ribs. Jonas collapsed with a wheezing, broken hum. Ethan Marrow, massive, silent Ethan, raised his hands halfway, conflict flickering in his lone good eye. Noah's gun trained on him instantly. Ethan slowly lowered his weapon and set it on the ground. The choice was simple. He wasn't paid enough to die for Helios. Noah stripped their weapons, secured zip ties around their wrists, and dragged Victor Kane free from Atlas's controlled hold. The German shepherd stepped back, chest heaving, teeth still bared but eyes locked on Noah for instruction. Noah gave a single nod. Atlas relaxed, though reluctantly, ears half folded in readiness. The remaining Helios mercenaries, upon hearing the commotion and seeing their leader's capture over comms, dropped their weapons rather than face a man who had outsmarted their entire operation. Noah marched them back to the bunker's outer perimeter, using a remote signal blocker to ensure no distress frequencies escaped. Inside the bunker once again, with the captives restrained and communications jammed, Noah accessed the last encrypted folder Mason had left, Protocol. His stomach tightened as he entered Mason's guessing key pattern, a mix only someone who knew Mason intimately would decipher. The file held a single secure contact, Rachel Hart. Noah recognized her name instantly. Rachel was an investigative journalist known for dismantling corruption inside the defense industry. She was in her early 30s, tall and slender, with chestnut hair usually tied back, sharp brown eyes, and a clean, assertive presence that commanded attention. Her work was fearless, her determination shaped by losing her older brother, a Marine, due to faulty equipment linked to corporate fraud. When she committed to a story, she pursued truth like a force of nature. She was exactly who Mason would trust. Noah sent her the files, everything. The proof of manipulated missions, financial trails, recorded communications, and the coordinates where Victor Kane and his team lay restrained. He included one more thing, Mason's video message. 2 weeks later, Noah and Atlas sat in an old roadside motel, the room lit only by the flickering glow of the muted television. Atlas rested his head on Noah's boot. The news anchor spoke with a tone of disbelief and triumph. The FBI today executed a coordinated raid on Helios Dynamics headquarters following the release of explosive evidence provided anonymously. Multiple senior officials, including Security Director Victor Kane, were arrested on charges of treason, corporate fraud, and orchestrating unlawful military actions. The screen flashed Mason Cole's service photo, a fallen soldier who sacrificed his life uncovering the truth. Noah exhaled, a long breath that seemed to unclench 7 years of torment. Later, before leaving Montana for good, he returned to the radar station one last time. Using the control panel Mason built, Noah activated its burial sequence. Steel supports retracted, power cores shut down, and the bunker slowly sealed itself beneath collapsing soil and sliding rock until nothing remained but empty land and whispering grass. Just before dawn, Noah and Atlas drove away in a beat-up pickup, windows cracked to let in the scent of pine and the cold, honest wind. Atlas leaned out, ears flapping freely, sneezing when the air hit him too hard. Noah laughed, a sound rare and real. They didn't know where they were going, but for the first time they weren't running, they were beginning. In the quiet glow of that first sunrise, as Noah and Atlas disappeared down the long Montana road, their story left behind a truth many of us forget. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels in white. Sometimes they come as a wounded dog on your doorstep, a memory that refuses to die, or the courage to stand again when the world thinks you're finished. Some people call it fate, some call it luck, but many believe it is God's way of reminding us that we are never as lost as we think. Every day in our own lives we walk through storms, loss, fear, loneliness, worry about tomorrow. And yet, just like Noah, help often comes in the smallest, quietest forms. A neighbor's kindness, a friend's voice, a prayer whispered in the dark, or the loyal heartbeat of a companion who refuses to leave our side. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel so more stories of loyalty, courage, and God's grace can reach those who are struggling. May God bless you, protect your home, strengthen your spirit, and send a little miracle your way, exactly when you need it most.